The sound of wind chimes jingled softly, blending with the light footsteps on the brick-paved sidewalk. A black and white border collie strolled leisurely beside its owner, gazing up with trusting eyes. They passed by vibrant red stalls, lanterns hanging high, golden New Year greeting cards shimmering under the sunlight, and fresh chrysanthemums bursting with fragrance. On Bolsa Avenue in Westminster, California, a bustling hub where the Asian community eagerly prepared for Lunar New Year, the morning seemed peaceful, but no one knew that in just a few minutes, something would happen, sending ripples of commotion through the entire street. Johnny Depp, 22 years old, a final-year information technology student at Cal State Fullerton, was the kind of person who blended into the crowd. A light brown leather jacket, faded gray jeans. Yet his eyes always carried a quiet depth, as if he were listening to sounds others overlooked. Walking beside Johnny was Max, a border collie he had adopted from a rescue shelter near Garden Grove. Max wasn't just intelligent, he was fiercely loyal. During stressful days filled with projects and exams, Max was the reason Johnny woke up early, took a breath of fresh air, stepped outside, and found life just a little more bearable. "Max, how about we try a new cafe today?" Johnny murmured, gently stroking the dog's head. They stopped in front of a Starbucks. Inside, the murmur of conversation, the rhythmic whirring of coffee grinders, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee spilled onto the sidewalk. Johnny tied Max to a wooden post near the entrance, an area designated for customers with pets, before stepping inside. Max sat obediently, head held high, ears perked, attentively observing the world around him. "What can I get you today?" a young barista asked. "Hot cappuccino, light foam. Thanks." Johnny smiled, quietly setting his earbuds on the table while waiting for his coffee. Outside, a gentle breeze carried bits of red confetti from a nearby Lunar New Year shop. Max remained still, his bright eyes scanning the passers-by, until three figures emerged from across the street, their footsteps heavy, something metallic glinting in their hands like a firecracker. No one knew what was about to unfold, but Max did, his ears flattened, his instincts kicking in. And Johnny, still inside waiting for his coffee, had no idea that in just a few minutes, his peaceful world was about to be tested in ways he never imagined. On a small street in Westminster, California, the morning air buzzed with the excitement of the upcoming Lunar New Year. Soft, festive music drifted from store speakers, while shoppers carried bags brimming with sweets, flowers, and holiday treats. But at the far end of the sidewalk, three young men stood in the shade. They didn't have the air of shoppers or festival goers: black leather jackets, faded gray jeans, and furtive glances. One of them, Tyler, clutched a bag filled with random items, including a small box of legal sparklers he had bought from a nearby stall. These sparklers were meant for celebrations, their bright flickers and sizzling sounds harmless to humans, but highly unsettling to animals. "Hey, look at that!" Tyler nodded toward Max, the border collie patiently waiting in front of the cafe. "Damn, that dog probably eats better than we do." The second guy chuckled. "Want to make it jump?" The third one pulled out his phone, ready to record. "Let's post it on TikTok. People love startled dog clips." They stepped closer. Max remained seated, ears erect, eyes keenly watching their movements. Tyler lit a sparkler. The tiny flame crackled, drawing a few passing glances, but no one intervened. Then he flicked it toward Max. The firework landed near the dog's paws, sizzling with tiny bursts of light. Max flinched, his body tensed, a whimper escaping as he tried to back away. But the leash held firm. His entire frame trembled, eyes wide with fear. Pedestrians slowed, some turning to look. "Get the shot! Look at it jump!" The guy with the phone laughed. But Tyler wasn't done. He lit another sparkler, this time tossing it dangerously close to Max's belly. The small explosion sent a sharp crack through the air. Max yelped in pain, curling into himself as the leash dug into his neck. Annoyed by the noise, Tyler scowled. "Shut up!" Then he lifted his foot and kicked the dog in the ribs. Max tumbled onto his side, gasping. An elderly woman selling flowers nearby gasped. "Oh my God!" More eyes turned toward them, but no one moved, still unsure of what was really happening. And then, from inside the cafe, someone stepped out. Johnny Depp. He didn't rush, but he wasn't slow either. His left hand held a steaming cup of cappuccino, while his right hand slid subtly into the pocket of his jacket. The wind tugged at the hem of his coat, tousling his brown hair to one side. Max immediately lifted his head. Though still crouched low against the brick pavement, his eyes lit up, ears perked toward his owner. But there was fear in those eyes, something that made Johnny pause for a split second. His dog had never looked at him like that before. Johnny set his coffee cup down on the step in front of the cafe, his gaze never leaving Max, those eyes wide, uncertain, as if asking, "Is this really happening?" The three young men stood barely 3 meters away. The one who had kicked Max was still chuckling under his breath. But the laughter died the moment Johnny lifted his head. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes locked onto Tyler, cold, deep, and empty, like the sky before a storm. A couple passing by with their child stopped. The woman gently tugged on her husband's sleeve, gesturing toward the unfolding scene. Inside the cafe, the owner stood frozen, still holding a dishcloth, his gaze fixed on the doorway. One of the thugs took half a step back. I think that's the dog's owner." Tyler shrugged, feigning indifference. "So what? It's not like I killed it." Johnny stepped forward. Max remained still, head slightly raised as if waiting for a signal. He stopped right in front of them, his voice as soft as the breeze. "Who kicked my dog?" Tyler squinted, trying to keep his composure. But something about the way Johnny stood, his posture straight, shoulders relaxed, gaze unwavering, felt off. "Relax, man. We were just messing around." Tyler forced a smirk, spreading his hands as if to prove his innocence. "Oh, really?" Johnny tilted his head slightly, voice steady. "You kicked a defenseless, restrained, terrified dog. And you call that messing around?" A gust of wind swept through the street, rustling dry leaves across the red brick pavement. No one laughed now. No one spoke. "It's just a dog," Tyler muttered again, this time shorter, sharper. Johnny looked down at Max, still trembling, legs curled beneath him. "This dog has slept under my desk on nights when I was too depressed to eat. It doesn't care if I'm successful or a failure. It only cares that I'm still breathing. Do you understand that?" No one answered. Johnny looked back up, his eyes sharpened, like a blade catching the light. "So I'll ask one more time. Who kicked my dog?" Tyler smirked, though unease flickered in his eyes. "I did. So what?" He crossed his arms, masking his discomfort with a cocky shrug. "It's a dog. If you care so much, don't leave it tied up outside." Johnny didn't react right away. He held Tyler's gaze for a few seconds, then slowly crouched down. Not to pick up a rock, not to threaten, just to unclip Max's leash. The dog nudged into Johnny's hand, his body still trembling, but he no longer looked afraid. Johnny ran a reassuring hand over Max's head and whispered, "It's okay. I'm here." That moment, a young man, calm and composed, comforting the dog that had just been abused, made several passers-by stop and watch in silence. Near the entrance of a flower shop, a woman holding a child whispered, "That's Johnny. He trains MMA at the sports center nearby. My husband took a self-defense class with him once." The man beside her nodded. "He's humble, but in the ring, he's lightning fast." The third guy in the group, Matt, the one recording with his phone, suddenly lowered it. "Wait, I know this guy," he muttered. "I've seen him in an MMA tournament clip from Santa Ana. He took down a guy twice his size." Tyler's jaw tensed. He heard it too, but pride kept him from backing down. "Oh, so you think knowing how to fight makes you a big deal?" he sneered, shoving Johnny lightly, testing him. Johnny didn't budge. He merely raised an eyebrow, the kind of look from someone who had heard that exact line 1,000 times before. "Number. But it means I know how to stay in control," Johnny replied evenly. Then he stepped forward, just enough to make Tyler instinctively lean back. The air grew thick. The Lunar New Year shoppers had stopped moving. They clutched their bags, held their children's hands, as if afraid the slightest motion might shatter the fragile tension in the air. Johnny lowered his voice, gaze locked onto Tyler. I won't throw the first punch, but if you take another step, then whatever happens next is a lesson you chose. The bigger guy in the group swallowed hard. Matt took another step back. Tyler, though, he was still stubborn, but the aggression in his eyes had been replaced by something else. Confusion. So what? You think you're better than me? He spat. Johnny didn't answer. Max, now standing strong, let out a low warning whimper. The wind blew again. Above them, the American flag outside the cafe rippled in the breeze, and on the ground, time seemed to freeze. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice whispered, "Don't make him teach you a lesson." Tyler clenched his fists. Under Johnny's unyielding gaze, he had two choices: back down or charge forward to salvage what little pride he had left. And in that brief moment, he chose wrong. He took another step. Immediately, a deep, gravelly voice rang out from behind. "If you're not smart, at least know when to stop." The entire street turned to look. A towering man was approaching, broad-shouldered, his muscular arms covered in intricate tattoos. Dressed in a black leather vest, his presence was as sharp as cold steel. He wasn't just another bystander. He was Keanu Reeves, a name that made the troublemakers of Westminster shrink like rats before a snake. Tyler stiffened, spinning around in a panic. "Oh, Keanu, I didn't know you were here." His voice faltered, unable to mask the sheer unease in his eyes. Matt shoved his phone into his pocket, while the heavy-set guy looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. Keanu didn't even glance at them. He walked straight up to Johnny, stopped, then gave a respectful nod. "Johnny," Keanu said, his tone laced with familiarity. "Didn't expect to see you here." Johnny returned a small nod, his expression calm as ever. "Hey, Keanu, it's been a while." The murmurs spread through the crowd. Some recognized Keanu. He had once been tangled in some shady incidents near the bus depot. But for the past 2 years, he had retired, focusing on running a gym and helping with local security. Keanu's gaze shifted to Max, who was now pressed firmly against Johnny's leg, his body still tense. Keanu frowned. "What happened?" Johnny flicked his eyes toward Tyler, who forced a nervous, crooked smile. Someone thought kicking a tied-up, defenseless dog was a good way to prove himself. Keanu turned to Tyler. His face remained unreadable, but his voice dropped half an octave. "That someone was you." Tyler's mouth went dry. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Keanu crossed his arms, eyes locked onto him. "Even if you don't know who Johnny is, you should at least know a dog doesn't deserve that. But unfortunately, today, you managed to piss off both of them at the same time." Silence. Somewhere in the crowd, someone let out a quiet chuckle, but no one dared to joke. Tyler swallowed hard, stepping back half a step. Johnny spoke evenly, his voice quiet but firm. "No need to make this bigger than it is. I can handle it." Keanu smirked slightly, tilting his head. "I don't doubt that, but if you ever need someone to clean up the mess afterward, you know where to find me." He gave Johnny a firm pat on the shoulder before turning away, stepping into the banh mi shop across the street, the place that served his favorite sandwich. As the door swung shut behind him, only Tyler remained, his face drained of color, while Johnny stood there, unchanged. Half the street had already figured it out. Something was about to happen, and they were standing in the perfect spot to witness it. Tyler's face was burning. His fists were clenched so tightly, his knuckles turned white. But his eyes, those eyes, were starting to flicker with doubt. Keanu's presence had shifted the entire atmosphere. And worse, his respectful bow toward Johnny was a silent slap across Tyler's face. But pride is never easy to swallow. "You think you're better than me just because you know a bit of martial arts?" Tyler snarled, latching on to the only defense he had left, his ego. And then, without warning, he roared in frustration and lunged. His fist swung forward, A wild, untrained punch. No strategy, no technique, just pure, desperate aggression. But Johnny didn't even need to dodge. In less than 2 seconds, he pivoted, lowering his stance. His shoulder absorbed the force, redirecting it smoothly. With a subtle hook of his left foot and a well-placed hip shift, Tyler collapsed like a sack of cement. Thud! The impact echoed through the street, a brutal, embarrassing fall. Face down, hands scrambling for balance. But it was too late. A breathless silence fell over the onlookers. Some gaped in shock at the sheer speed of it. Others smirked. Max stepped forward, standing beside Tyler, who was groaning as he tried to push himself up. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stared, with the quiet, piercing gaze of someone who had been hurt and was now being protected. Tyler turned his head upward, and for the first time, his eyes showed true fear. Not fear of the fall, but fear of something he didn't understand. The strength of a man who didn't need to prove it, only use it when necessary. Tyler sat there breathing heavily. No one touched him, but it felt as though a weight heavier than concrete was crushing him, not from the fall, but from the way the crowd was looking at him now. Not with anger, not even pity, but with quiet, overwhelming disappointment. As Tyler stared at the ground, Max nudged against Johnny's leg, softly, obediently, yet with a silent, resolute rejection of fear. The bread shop door swung open again. Keanu walked back out, a sandwich in hand, chewing as he surveyed the scene. He didn't need to ask what had happened. It was obvious. He stepped up beside Johnny. "Is it over?" Keanu asked, his tone carrying the weight of an older brother checking in, making sure his younger sibling hadn't gone too far. Johnny gave a small nod. "It's over. Just a small lesson." Keanu glanced at Tyler, still slumped on the ground. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "The first time you fall because of your own arrogance, it's a lesson. The second time, it's your nature." The words landed in the silence like the toll of a heavy bell. Tyler looked up. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to push back against. Because in that moment, through the eyes of a dog, he had seen himself, distorted, crude, and small. No one reached out a hand to help him up. And strangely, that was what made him want to stand, for the first time, for the right reason. Johnny had already turned, ready to leave with Max. But then, Tyler spoke, not with arrogance, not with an attempt to prove anything, just the voice of someone who knew they needed to change. "Johnny," his back was still hunched from shame. "Can I come train where you train?" Johnny turned. A few people furrowed their brows, assuming he wanted a rematch. But Tyler quickly continued, as if afraid he'd lose his nerve. "Not to fight anyone, not to get stronger, but to learn how to be a better person, like you." He lowered his gaze to Max, then added quietly, almost like an apology, "and to never kick another animal again." Johnny didn't respond right away. He simply looked at him. The crowd, Keanu, even the street itself seemed to hold its breath. A small child whispered to his mother, "That man is saying sorry, isn't he?" Finally, Johnny spoke. "The gym is open on Mondays and Thursdays, but if you come to learn, not to forget what you did." Tyler nodded. For the first time in his life, his shoulders felt lighter, not because someone else was carrying his burden, but because he had begun to remove the weight himself. Monday, 6 p.m. Inside the Westminster Sports Center's martial arts training room, bright overhead lights illuminated the thick mats on the floor. Steady breaths filled the space as students warmed up. Johnny, dressed in a simple gray-black training uniform, was demonstrating to two newcomers how to maintain balance when pivoting their hips. The door creaked open. Tyler stood at the entrance. No hoodie, no swagger in his step. Just a plain t-shirt, athletic pants, and hands that didn't know where to rest. One of the students spotted him and frowned. "Hey, that's the guy who kicked the dog last time." Another looked ready to confront him, but Johnny simply raised a hand, calm, dismissive. "Leave him be." Tyler stepped inside, keeping his gaze low. In the corner near the lockers, Max lay quietly, a silent guardian of the class. As Tyler passed, he hesitated. Then carefully, he placed a small strip of dried meat into the little bowl beside Max. The dog didn't bark, didn't flinch. He simply lifted his head and looked at Tyler, not with hostility, but not with forgiveness either. Tyler sat at the back of the class. Johnny spoke just one sentence. "Take off your shoes. Learn like a beginner. No one gets special treatment here." And from that moment, Tyler started from scratch. The stance, the breathing, the way to move without making unnecessary noise. Small things. But this time, he took his time. Not because he was slow, but because, for once, he refused to do it carelessly. Johnny didn't treat him differently. He taught him like everyone else. But sometimes his gaze lingered, just for a second longer, checking, wondering, is this person truly trying? One evening after class, Tyler stayed behind to clean the mats. No one asked him to. No one told him to. Johnny was putting away the gloves when he heard the question, spoken softly, "Have you really forgiven me yet?" Johnny was quiet for a moment before replying, "Forgiveness isn't something given to you. It's something you live in a way that earns." Tyler nodded, quietly. No excuses, no arguments, just acceptance. He turned back and continued wiping the mats, each motion precise, like the way he had started learning to throw a proper kick. From the corner, Max watched, then let out a soft sneeze, almost like a sign. Johnny smiled. The transformation had begun, not from the fall, but from choosing to stand back up the right way. A chilly evening. Tyler had just finished training at the MMA gym, his old backpack slung over his shoulder, sweat still cooling on his skin. He stopped at a small food stall near Westminster Mall, buying his usual banana smoothie, something Johnny had suggested as part of a better diet. Outside the shop, a little boy, around 7 years old, was walking his tiny chihuahua on a red knit leash. The small dog, cream-colored with big round eyes, bounced around playfully at the boy's feet. The child crouched down, patting its head gently, whispering, "Be careful. Don't run too far, okay? Mommy says the streets can be dangerous." The story would have ended there, if not for the two young men who had just stepped out of the gaming store next door. Both had moss-green dyed hair, tank tops, and soda cans in hand. One of them swung his foot, kicking near the little dog's tail. "Hey, hey, look at this thing. Looks like a toy from a Happy Meal." They both burst into laughter. Another kick, this time harder, startled the chihuahua, sending it scurrying behind the little boy's legs. The child turned pale, crouching down to shield his dog, eyes welling with tears. "Please, don't scare him." Tyler stood less than 5 meters away. He placed his smoothie down on the table, eyes fixed on the scene. Then he stepped forward, not in a rush, but with purpose. The two young men were still snickering when Tyler spoke, his voice calm. "Grown men? Picking on a puppy and a kid?" One of them turned to snap back, but froze the moment he recognized Tyler's face and broad frame. "Wait, aren't you the guy who got slammed at the cafe?" Tyler nodded. "Yeah, that was me. But now I know how to control myself." He looked them straight in the eye, not with anger, not with intimidation, just the look of a man who had done wrong and learned how to do right. One of them forced an awkward chuckle, scratching the back of his head. "Chill, man. We were just messing around." Tyler didn't reply. Instead, he turned to the boy and knelt down. "Is your dog okay?" The child nodded, though his eyes were still red. "Hold on to the leash tight, all right? And remember, never be ashamed of loving animals." The boy nodded firmly. The little chihuahua hesitated, then wagged its tail and timidly licked Tyler's hand. Tyler stood up and walked away. The two young men didn't need anyone to tell them to leave. They just did, quietly. Back at the smoothie shop, the elderly owner looked at Tyler, then gave a small nod. "I heard you once kicked a dog, but now I see you protecting one. Seems like people really can change." Tyler smiled as he took his now cold smoothie from her hands. "Honestly, the first dog I ever kicked is the one that started changing me." That evening, the MMA gym was quieter than usual. It was an advanced technique session, reserved only for those who were truly committed. Tyler still showed up. He warmed up in silence, focusing on every movement, every pivot of his shoulders, every shift of his stance, every breath. Johnny watched from a distance, didn't say anything, just observed. But his expression had changed, no longer wary, no longer doubtful. As the class wrapped up, the other students trickled out. Tyler stayed behind, wiping down the mats as always. Johnny walked over and tossed him a water bottle. "Heard you did something good today." Tyler looked up, a little surprised. "Who told you that?" "Westminster's small. The shop owners all know me." Tyler lowered his gaze, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just didn't want anyone else to see a dog looking at them that way. Once was enough." Johnny nodded, then walked over to a wooden locker near the window. Max, his Border Collie, was curled up nearby, resting his head against the chair leg, as always. But when Johnny approached with Tyler, Max lifted his head and stretched. No barking, no shrinking back. Tyler stopped a few steps away. "I know he hasn't forgiven me yet," Johnny smiled. "You never asked him to. You just started being different. And sometimes, that's enough." Tyler knelt down, not out of guilt this time, but simply to say hello. Max studied him for a moment, didn't flinch, didn't retreat, just looked. A long pause. And then Max leaned forward and licked Tyler's hand. Not hard, not for long, just a brief, quiet gesture, a silent acknowledgement. "I remember, but I accept." Tyler didn't move. Something stirred inside him. Not tears, but something else. A kind of forgiveness that didn't need words. Johnny crossed his arms, watching with softened eyes. "All right then. Just don't make him regret it." Tyler let out a small chuckle, genuine, unforced. "I'll wipe down the other side of the mat tonight, too." Johnny nodded and headed toward the locker room. As the door shut behind him, Max remained by Tyler's side, his tail gently thumping against the mat each time Tyler shifted. That night, no one spoke of the past, but for those who had witnessed even a small part of it, they understood that a journey toward forgiveness doesn't end with an apology. It ends with actions, repeated over and over, until trust finds its way back. A few weeks later, the Starbucks cafe had returned to its usual rhythm. Richly scented coffee, the soft chime of wind bells, and Max, the loyal Border Collie, resting his head beneath Johnny's familiar table. No longer wary as he had been before, Max now welcomed gentle strokes from customers, played alongside children, and always found a small bowl of water waiting for him near the door, courtesy of the staff. Yet few knew that this place had once witnessed the turning point in a man's life. Tyler, the one who had kicked Max and disregarded everything, now attended MMA classes regularly. No one forced him, no one kept watch. Yet every week he wiped down the training mats, reminded new students to respect the space, and sometimes was the first to speak up when someone made a thoughtless joke. One day Johnny asked, "How long do you plan on training?" Tyler answered without hesitation, "Until the day I can look in the mirror and know that the person I used to be will never appear again." Tyler's story began to spread, not through news or social media, but through the words of those who had seen it with their own eyes. The little boy who had once clutched his chihuahua outside the supermarket now came to the gym every week with his father. They weren't there to fight. They were there to learn how to stand tall when it mattered. The cafe waitress, who had once trembled when she saw Johnny step out that day, now always set aside 2 cappuccinos, one for Johnny and one for Tyler. She simply said, "No one is born good. Some just dare to start over." And Keanu, the man once feared as the boss of the block, was no longer a name spoken with intimidation. He had become a bridge, standing between the old and the new. Now he often stopped by the gym just to ask, "Is that kid still showing up?" Max's story, the dog that had been kicked, but still knew how to forgive, became a quiet symbol of the town. One day, a 5th-grade student wrote in an essay, "My hero doesn't wear a cape. He just walks around and has a dog that knows how to forgive." Johnny never spoke much about the past. To him, every fall had its value, if the person who fell chose to rise in the right direction. One day someone asked him, "Why did you forgive Tyler so quickly?" Johnny simply replied, "Because once I too hurt people without realizing it. And if back then no one had taught me how to stop, then today there wouldn't be a Max who trusts me." The story ends here, but the lesson does not, because forgiveness is not the end of a mistake. It is the beginning of a chain of right choices. And sometimes all it takes is one person doing the right thing at the right time for the ripple to begin.